It's hard to believe, but Coco didn't begin as the masterpiece we know today. The version Pixar first developed was a completely different story. For starters, the hero wasn't Miguel. It was Marco, a kid from suburban America, and it wasn't a journey about honoring his ancestors. It was a literal breakout musical, and the biggest surprise, the family in the afterlife operated more as antagonists than as the story's emotional anchor. It wasn't even called Coco yet. The project was simply known as Day of the Dead. It would take years before the filmmakers finally unearthed the true soul of the film. But before they did, this is the story of Coco, the almost told. It all began in 2010, after the success of Toy Story 3, when director Lee Unkrich started exploring a simple but powerful question: what connects us to the people who came before us? That question became the emotional seed for Day of the Dead, and just like the skeletons wandering through the land of the dead, was made up of scattered pieces, ideas, themes, and elements that hadn't fully come together yet. The story didn't crystallize in a single draft. It took nearly 6 years of writing, storyboarding, and reshaping ideas before every piece finally clicked together. Development began as a generic fish-out-of-water story. The lead was Marco, a Mexican-American kid who didn't speak Spanish and was disconnected from his Mexican roots. He traveled to Mexico for one reason: to cope with the recent death of his mother. Unlike Miguel, whose connection to music and tradition was already woven into his life, Marco entered the story as an outsider, unfamiliar with the customs, the spirit world, and even the cultural rhythms that shaped the world of Coco. His journey wasn't about returning to something he knew. It was about discovering a heritage he barely understood. In many ways, Marco reflected the filmmakers themselves. Director Lee Unkrich and writer Matthew Aldridge have both been candid about the profound personal distance they felt from the culture they were trying to portray. They were looking at the holiday from the outside in. That's why early versions of the opening include a long musical introduction explaining Day of the Dead to the audience, because the filmmakers themselves were still learning what the culture meant. But before the story could find its bearings, it nearly died in a PR disaster. In 2013, Disney filed a request to trademark the phrase Day of the Dead. The public reaction was immediate and fierce. How could a corporation own a sacred culture holiday? The backlash became a turning point. Disney dropped the trademark and began rethinking the film's direction. To stay true to its roots, Adrian Molina, a Mexican-American story artist who would later become the film's co-writer and co-director, helped guide the story toward a more authentic cultural perspective. As the story developed, the Pixar team struggled to introduce Marco's family to the audience. In this early concept, music was technically forbidden within the Rivera household. Yet it was still used as a narrative tool to explain their family traditions and history. In one deleted song sequence, the entire family used music to explain to Marco the importance of their shoemaking legacy, and it's a little on the nose.
They're family, and they depend on us to keep their memories alive. Marco, take a look. You know who this is? This is me, Papa. You know what he did. 57 years, he made shoes.
He made shoes. He made shoes.
We make shoes.
In this version, Abuela functioned less as a warm guardian and more as an in-your-face narrative guide. The song itself was lively, but it felt almost too explanatory. In this early version, some of the final film's most important elements were already present, including Ernesto de la Cruz's guitar. But it wasn't just a portal between worlds, it was Marco's lifeline, and without it, he wouldn't be able to make it back home. Throughout Marco's adventure, music carried a very different emotional weight. In this early version, music was tied to a family curse. Every time Marco played his guitar, his skeletal relatives were forced to sing, trapped in an involuntary rhythm.
It's my family! Can this thing go any faster?
This resulted in the family becoming an angry mob, chasing Marco across the spirit world, trying to stop the music. Hector appeared in this version as well, but not as the fringe outsider we came to adore. Instead, he was a tour bus driver, running sightseeing trips to the afterlife. It was playful and fun, but it lacked the emotional depth and heartbreak that would later define him.
Ouch.
And you, senora? What's your name? How did you die?
Who are you talking to?
Please hold all questions. Who's ready to have a good time?
I am.
I can't hear you.
I am.
Louder.
I am.
That's more. Like it.
Ernesto de la Cruz was still the main antagonist, but instead of serving as an emotional conflict, he played more of a traditional final boss. In the finished version, the climax centers on Ernesto throwing Miguel from a tower, a moment that exposes his true darkness to the afterlife. But in this earlier draft, the confrontation played out differently. Rather than attempting to kill Marco outright, Ernesto destroys his guitar, the very object keeping him connected to the living world, in front of a stadium audience. Instead of being crushed by a falling bell, this early version ends with Ernesto brought down by a shoe from Imelda, a satisfying moment of justice, but a far less dramatic downfall. With Marco's guitar shattered, his only bridge back to the living world is now gone, but in that moment of defeat, the family who had spent the entire journey chasing him decides to help him. In a powerful act of unity and family, they gather the fragments and rebuild the instrument piece by piece. Once the guitar is repaired, Marco races against the clock to reach the Marigold Bridge before it dissolves away. In this version, there was no sunrise deadline. Instead, the falling leaves served as a visual countdown. As Marco nears his destination, a more traditional final confrontation unfolds, with Ernesto attempting to stop him.
Not ruin my name. I must be remembered.
At its core, the soul of Coco was always there, but the heart of the story took some time to find. All the essential elements were present, but they weren't fully connected yet. Then the filmmakers made one of their most important creative decisions. They removed the magical curse and replaced it with a family wound. They began asking a new question: why would a family hate music? Not because of a curse, but because music carried the weight of a painful chapter in the Rivera past. That shift changed everything. The story stopped being about adventure and escape and became a story about forgiveness and the unconditional love of family. This deeper understanding inspired the filmmakers to remove Marco, the American tourist, and replace him with Miguel, a child of Mexico. By honoring the spirit of Mexican heritage, not as a plot device but as the beating heart of the film, Pixar didn't just make a better movie, they made a bridge that families have walked across together, in dark theaters and in living rooms all across the world, celebrating and remembering the people we love. The movie Pixar almost made didn't disappear. It became the stepping stone that led to the story the world would come to love and will always remember.